In the noon hour, in place of Mike Bullard here on News Talk 1010, I'm going to talk to Catherine Swift coming up. She got her hands on a teachers union document that was not supposed to be released to the public. In-depth radio, News Talk 1010. I'm Jerry Yeagar. So we learned the other day, I guess it was yesterday, that the secondary schools teachers said we'll go back to allowing teachers to do extracurriculars. Story today tells us that maybe some 20% of teachers are still angry and won't do extracurriculars. I have a suspicion they weren't doing them anyway, that 20%, but I may be wrong about that. I think the ones that are enthusiastic about being with kids and teaching kids and sharing experiences with kids, we're probably happy to get back to it because, like parents, they kind of see it as being part of the job. The union, of course, has one thing that they'll say to us, and then they have their communication among themselves. What exactly are the teachers saying? Well, Catherine Swift is the chair of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, and she got her hands on an internal memo from the union to the teachers. Catherine, do you have a 00 license?
No, I don't, but I do get brown bagged a fair bit of stuff.
All right.
So somebody is obviously one of those.
Somebody put a manila envelope underneath your desk or underneath your door. And so what do you think you learned from this internal communication?
Well, this is obviously the union boss, the teacher union boss, Ken Corin in this case, justifying all the money they have spent from teachers' dues in many ways. And I know, Jerry, you and I have talked about it before. In the 2011 election, teachers' unions alone spent over $5 million on political purposes, part of it through the so-called Working Families Coalition, which is basically Union Front Coalition. It should be called if there was truth in advertising. But some of that, I was amazed at some of the arrogance in this, because don't forget, this is communicating with his members, right? His teacher members who are probably wondering, gee, we supported, this government so much, and now it appears to be turning on us. And I think also, though, it's implying, and it's not explicitly said, but it's implying there will be more goodies. They are going to get the government under the new premier to back off on some of this stuff. But some of the rhetoric here, they claim to have stole the ability of the Liberals to form a majority, influence McGuinty's decision to resign. Clearly, they're running the province, Terry.
Okay, so as an organization, though, do they, to play devil's advocate with you, Catherine, do they have the right, as much as anybody else, to try and push for the electoral result they want?
Well, actually, what is very interesting is, through some legislation around election financing, so-called third-party organizations, and this was, by the way, tailored to permit the actions of this entity, the Working Families Coalition, as well as some of these unions, they actually are permitted to spend more than a company is. In fact, unlimited amounts of money.
Yeah,
So, no, it's not fair. It is not fair the way the law is written right now. A company or an individual is very limited as what they can spend. These so-called third parties can blow the bank. And, of course, let's face it, unions in Ontario and Canada are the only ones left in the world who can force dues and spend them on political purposes. Every other country, including Europe, has done away with that extortion.
Well, and often against the wishes of many of their members.
Of course it's against the wishes. How can every single one, vote the same way? That's just ludicrous.
Catherine Swift is with me. She's the chair of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business and got a hold of a memo from the head of the president, actually, of the Ontario Secondary Teachers Federation, the OSSTF, and the FEESO. What's that one?
Well, that's the French.
I see. Yeah. But you have the English version, at least the one that you sent me, which, by the way, is signed in solidarity, which is a nice communist way of doing things. But I understand that that's how the union likes to operate. But they talk here about how their actions got McGuinty to step down, got rid of Laurel Broughton. And do you think you see within this Ken Corin, the president of the union, telling his members, hang in there because with Kathleen Wynne, we're going to get a better deal?
That's what I see. and he's already talked about they're going to use measures under the labor relations to open up collective bargaining agreements in midterm. And so, in other words, maybe the freeze is off. There's been all kinds of, I smell a rat. I definitely smell a rat here, because there's been too much of these sort of movements lately by these union bosses to back off. So they're not doing that for no reason.
Well, they talk about how they're going to resolve issues, a commitment to ensure fairness and consistency in the application of terms imposed, which I would read to say we're going to get back to business as usual the way it used to be, where if we didn't feel like negotiating at the end of a contract, we just waited it out till they gave us what we wanted, which normal people are not in a position to do. It does kind of, in my first read through this thing, look as though he's trying to tell any teachers who are still upset about everything that in fact, Kathleen Wynne, despite how it looks right now publicly, is really somewhere along the line going to cave into the union.
Well, that's exactly what I read into it, and of course it's not explicitly stated, but that's certainly the tone of it very much. And I think the bigger issue here, Jerry, and it gets back a bit to, doesn't anybody have the right to influence elections? And to a point, yes, but we do have election spending rules for a reason, so that no one group. But the election spending rules under McGuinty, by the way, and this is no accident, a few years ago, were jigged to permit groups like this to literally spend unlimited amounts. And what the teachers' unions alone spent in the last election was equal to what some of the political parties spent. We're not talking about small potatoes here. And I mean, do we want our province or our country or whatever to be run by public sector union bosses? We've seen what that's done in other jurisdictions like Greece and California. Ultimately, it's not a good economic, driver, and it will ultimately bankrupt a jurisdiction.
Well, earlier this morning on Round 1 on Moore in the Morning, which I participate in at 7:45, the issue of Rob Ford, and they're not going to go forward on an investigation on his election spending, I threw out the comment that I didn't think there should be limits. There should just be real transparency on who gives what to whom. And people said, well, you can't be doing that. And I said, yeah, but the unions aren't accountable. And people were insisting, oh, yes, they are. They are accountable. They're accountable if an individual from a union or a union makes a direct contribution to a politician. But in these larger issues you're talking about, with the Families Coalition, et cetera, they spend millions to influence an election. Are there organizations on the right that are doing the same?
Well, I was just going to get there, Jerry. You're very prescient. A number of individuals that are concerned about this for democratic reasons have actually banded together, and I'm one of their advisory members for an entity called the Workplace Democracy Institute. And what our goal is going to be, among other things, is to make public. I mean, you can get these numbers if you bother to do your homework, but your average person, they don't have the ability or time to do that. But this new organization, Workplace Democracy Institute, is going to be shining the light on what's going on here, and I think people will be shocked when they see the numbers involved. All
right, well then we'll hear from you on that in the future, I'm sure. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Jerry.
Catherine Swift, chair of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. The closing argument coming up, and Seamus O'Regan in for Mike Bullard on In-Depth Radio, News Talk 1010.